Greetings and salutations, and welcome back to Colin's Last Stand right here on YouTube. My name, as always, is Colin Moriarty. And if I'm looking a little plump in the stomach, it's because I am, indeed, a little plump in the stomach. There's this Italian place near my new apartment in Santa Monica, and it's just way too fucking good. And also, I eat there way too fucking much, and the people there are already starting to recognize me after like 2 weeks. It's not a good scene. Nonetheless, I appreciate you being here. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about transgender and transracial issues, and really just issues of what I feel like are personal liberty-driven issues. Issues that are of the mind and of the heart and of the individual. And I feel like there's a lot of confusion out there about some of these issues, in my estimation anyway. And I also feel like there's a lot of ill will about these issues from both sides. And I just want to explain to you how I kind of approach the issues surrounding transgender, the issues surrounding trans race, the issues surrounding all of these kinds of things. And why, at the end of the day, regardless of what the science says or doesn't say, and I think that's important and that's relevant, and we're going to get into that a little bit, I also feel like it doesn't really matter. And so I'm curious what you guys, of course, think about this. So let's get into how I approach these very modern, these very strange sort of issues that I would have never even guessed we'd be talking about 10 years ago. But then again, we didn't really know that a lot of these issues were pertinent or prominent or coming to a head even a decade ago. So I was reading the science, the literature, as best as I could about gender dysphoria, the idea that a person who's born, say, a male with male parts, with a penis and whatnot, and the chromosomes that indicate that that person's a male, etc. and so on, actually sometimes feel like they're a woman. They don't feel like they're a man. And vice versa, of course, as well. And of course, there's different permutations of this. I'm not going to get into it. I don't even really understand all of it, to be perfectly honest with you. And what I really found out when I was reading about it were a few things. First of all, a lot of this shit's way over my head in terms of the scientific literature. I was reading American Scientific. I was reading stuff on Harvard. I was reading all of these kinds of things to see what people were saying about the scientific consensus surrounding gender dysphoria, and specifically if the prevailing wisdom that it's a scientific or at least a biological trait that can be traced somewhere in the brain, somewhere in your genetics, whatever it might be, as opposed to something that some people indicate is a mental illness. Well, I found that the literature is a little bit mixed. And while it seems to be leaning towards it being scientific, leaning towards it being able to be explained by brain structure, explained by genetics, explained by all of these kinds of things, in addition to nurture, not only nature, but indeed nurture, there are other indications that it's really not anything more than an illness, a mental illness, or something that society kind of brings on a person in terms of ridicule and all those kinds of things that make a person feel persecuted, etc. and so on. So we're going to get into all of that in a very brief way. But again, I don't really understand the science, so I'm not going to try to explain it to you. And I feel like with Caitlyn Jenner being kind of considered a brave person today, and with kind of the zeitgeist right now of acceptance of transgender issues. I said long ago, actually, at my old company, that transgender issues, I think, are going to be the 21st century's gay or civil rights, like black issues, as it were, meaning that this is the next fight for equality. So I'm going to leave the scientific debate here. I don't really think that there's much more to say because I'm not a scientist. I don't really understand this stuff. But I want to give you both sides of the argument so you can kind of figure out where you stand. And of course, you can Google around. I also, of course, as always, put citations in the description here on YouTube so you can go read, click around, Google around, kind of get lost in that rabbit hole if you want. One perspective came from a Scientific American, which is a great publication, that says, quote, "Overall, the weight of these studies," and the studies they're referring to are in the story again if you want to read them, "and others points strongly towards a biological basis for gender dysphoria. But given the variety of transgender people and the variation in the brains of men and women generally, it will be a long time, if ever, before a doctor can do a brain scan on a child and say, yes, this child is trans," end quote. So that's one side of the coin, right? That's one side of the literature, as it were, kind of wrapped up, encapsulated in a paragraph. The other side I want to indicate, to be fair, is the argument from none other than the very widely respected World Health Organization, which still classifies gender dysphoria to this day as a mental illness. And while there are people that want to try to overturn this, and there are entire countries, I think like Denmark, that have already basically removed that descriptor from gender dysphoria, the World Health Organization is no slouch. It's one of the most respected health groups in the entire world, and they still consider gender dysphoria as a mental illness, not as something that's natural and needs to be dealt with. So these are two different arguments. I bring this up simply because it's irrelevant to me. And I think that people have gotten too lost in the weeds on transgender rights specifically. I'm not going to sit here and walk around and act like I know a ton of transgender people, because I don't. I know a few over time. They've always been very nice, very normal, very kind people to me. But again, that's a small sample size. The question goes beyond that to me. The question goes towards a person's ability to make choices for themselves and how we balance that in a modern society. And I feel like all the chatter and all the talk about, well, this has a biological or scientific basis and you're born with your chromosomes and this, that, and the other thing and all this, and people are making fun of the Bill Nye segment, which I agree, by the way, was completely fucking stupid and really bad. Nonetheless, why do we care so much about the genetic, biological, scientific basis for it? I see a lot of what I would only term as sort of concern trolling about this, of people being like, these people are mentally ill and we need to take care of them and stuff, and I'm not so sure that people making that argument really care about transgender people. At the same time, I think that there are probably some authentic people out there. There certainly are some authentic scholars and various people out there that look at this and say, like, well, we can't encourage folks to be acting in such a way that they're going to affect their body, they're going to destroy their genitals, they're going to take hormones to change who they are. We're really encouraging bad behavior and mentally ill behavior, I should say, that isn't within the realm of societal norms, isn't within the realm of humanitarian norms. At first blush, I understand this argument, and I'm sympathetic to it too, because I feel like, yes, we need to watch out for our fellow man. If we see a homeless person on the street, that's a sad situation, right? We wouldn't want to encourage them to stay in that situation. If we see a mentally ill schizophrenic person, we don't want them to take medications or to use drugs or substances that are going to make their schizophrenia worse. I understand this argument, but knowing the few transgender people I've known over time, and also kind of reading about it and trying to experience what's going on in that particular community, it doesn't seem like it's a mentally ill community, at least to me, at least, at large. Yes, it's true that off-cited studies showing that transgender people commit suicide, or attempt suicide anyway, at far larger and higher rates than the normal population, like something like 35 or 40 times more than a normal so-called cisgendered, I hate that fucking word, but so-called cisgendered person. That's true. But at the same time, as I was reading about a lot of this stuff, it seems like a lot of the travails and problems that transgender people go through seem to be because of the way society treats them. And I wonder if there isn't some sort of A-B relationship here, some sort of, well, if this, then this kind of relationship. If a transgender person, let's presume, is totally normal and not mentally ill, and I think that that's probably the case, then if they're put upon by society in such a way that they're outcast, that they can't get a normal job, they're not treated normally by their friends or family or their peers and society all around them, they can't go to the mall without being stared at like a monster or some sort of creature, then that's going to affect their ability to survive in modern society. And so I think that a lot of this stuff is sort of a permutation of the biology and also a permutation of nurture, as I brought up earlier. So a nature and nurture argument, but the nurture hasn't really been keeping up with nature, and therefore I feel like transgender people are kind of against the wall. They're damned if they do and damned if they don't. If they're mentally ill, then they're supposed to be coddled and in a lot of ways made fun of and in a lot of ways concern trolled. But if they're not mentally ill, then they're looked at as others, or they're looked at as these kind of societal scapegoats that are encapsulating everything that's wrong in 21st century society, and I just don't think it's right. Now, I want to be clear about a few things, too. I feel like transgender society at large, or at least transgender activism, is extremely hostile. It's extremely pushy. It's extremely non-understanding, which is ironic because they want everyone else to be understanding about them, too. And I get that argument. I see that argument a lot. I've read a lot about it, and I've experienced it in my own way. I remember someone yelling at me because I was using the term transgendered as opposed to transgender, and that was like the fucking outrage of the week for that person. And I also think that the argument over pronouns, while understandable, are also a little ridiculous, too. I don't understand how the word they, which has a defined definition, is now used to refer to one person. Doesn't make any sense. You're not going to really see me kind of get on board with that. At the same time, these made-up pronouns, these genderless pronouns like zer, I mean, you're not going to see me get on board with that either. But I do think that there is an argument to be made that society should look at a person that is, say, a male biologically, that just says to society, I want to be a female now. I want to be a female. And we should look at that person and say, it doesn't matter if it's biological. It doesn't matter if it's genetic. It doesn't matter if it's natural. You have the liberty and the right to do what you want to do to yourself, as long as you're not infringing on the rights of others. You know, this is really similar to the argument I was making a long time ago and have made since about homosexuality, about being gay. The science is conclusive. The science is clear. being gay is not a choice. It's biological. It's in your brain. No one wakes up one day and is like, I want to be attracted to the other sex now, or I want to be attracted to the same sex now. We all know, you know and I know, that, well, I'm attracted to women. I don't know any other way. You're probably attracted, if you're a man, to women, or a woman, you're attracted to men. But there are men that are attracted to men and women that are attracted to women, and that's totally normal and that's totally natural. But who cares? Let's say that the science came out and said, hey, we've had this revelatory scientific research that indicates that being gay is somehow a choice, and you didn't even realize you were making it, and it's somehow a choice. That wouldn't change the consensus for me at all. That wouldn't change the arithmetic about how I feel at all. If a gay person was making that choice, they're still given the liberty to make that choice. And I kind of approach the issue of transgenderism, if that's even the word. I don't want to offend anyone. I don't know if that's the right word. Gender dysphoria, I should say. I don't want to approach that any differently. Whether it's scientific or whether it's not seems to be an excuse, and I understand that some people want to research that and kind of clamp it down because that did help gay rights indeed by saying, well, it's biological. But to me, people like me don't look at it like that. It's the same way I look at even issues of societal norms or societal irregularities. I often use the example of polygamy. Now, if a woman and a man are in a relationship, and then that man wants to marry another woman, who is the government to say, or who are we to say that they can't do that as long as everyone in there is on the up and up, as long as everyone in there is in on the game? It's the same thing with homosexuality. It's the same thing with being transgender, the gender dysphoria. If that person isn't hurting anyone else, I say that they have the right to hurt themselves if your opinion indeed is that they are hurting themselves. And I don't think that they necessarily are, although I'm sure some people are hurting themselves. And yes, there's all sorts of gray area here. There's no doubt about it. I get really distressed when I read about young children, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, being put into hormone therapy and being like, I don't think that that's right. I don't think that that's normal. A person needs to make their own decision. A 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old, I don't think can make their own decision based on that. That's too weighty a decision. And so I understand that people are distressed and even disgusted by some of that. And I agree with you. I don't know that I'd use the word disgusted for my own feelings, but I'm distressed by stuff like that because these are children. They have no idea what the fuck they're doing. They have no idea what the world is. They have no idea what they think. Think about yourself when you were 10 or 12. I think about myself when I was in high school. I think about myself when I was in college. I didn't know fucking anything. And yes, there are issues of societal governance that also need to be dealt with here as well. My answer would be, I don't know that we should be involved in this at all. I don't know that the people or tax money or anything like that should be going towards assignment therapy or surgery or anything like that. I think that that's just something that a person has to take on themselves because you just don't know with all the gray area what's really going on. It's the same way, frankly, I feel about abortion. I have no problem with a woman getting an abortion. I have no problem with that. I'm pro-choice. But I understand that the taxpayer should probably not be on the hook for that. So that's just some representation of some of the gray area. And I also see, and this is kind of a minor issue, but issues of athletics with transgenderism I think is going to come to a head soon too. You're seeing a lot of stories out of different things with weightlifting and with running and all these kinds of things of genetically male athletes that identify as women competing with women and basically destroying them, because the fact of the matter is no matter what's going on in the head, if you're born with a male body, you are typically going to be stronger. You are typically going to be faster. That's just biology. That's just nature. That's just the way it is. And so we have to kind of tackle those issues as they come as well. There is no doubt about that. But I understand that the situation is overwhelming for a lot of people, and it's overwhelming for me too. I was looking recently when I was doing research for this particular video at a story about LGBTQIAAP people. And it's a little ridiculous. I agree. I mean, I don't really even understand what gender fluidity is. I don't understand or even maybe think pansexuality, for instance, is real. I had to look that up. I don't know what the fuck that means. One of the Q's in there means questioning. I mean, we're getting way too in the weeds, and I agree that a lot of people are looking at this rolling their eyes, and I'm with you there. I think that a lot of it is a little ridiculous. But remember again the fundamental question of liberty. If a person wants to identify as pansexual and we don't even know what that really means, or we don't believe that that exists, does that really affect our reality, or is that something that that person just wants to do to be happy? And if that person simply asks friends and family and society around them to just respect that choice, and that doesn't really infringe on us personally, then who are we to say that we shouldn't do something like that? Why can't we all pursue happiness in the way that's most effective for us, again, as long as we're not infringing on the rights or the safety of other people? A woman coming out and saying, like, I want to be a man now doesn't affect my life. A man saying that he wants to identify now as a woman and be a she and dress in dresses and high heels and all those kinds of things and be a woman in society, that doesn't affect me. And you have to understand that this has been blown out of proportion in terms of math as well. There are very few people suffering from gender dysphoria in the world, and the numbers go from something like 1% of people in certain countries to a fraction of 1% of people. I mean, we're talking about virtually nobody when you look around you. You're not really seeing these people in your day-to-day life, but they exist, and they have the right to exist, and they have the right to thrive, and they have the right to feel safe. And I really want to encourage people to kind of remove the politics from it, remove the kind of cagey, is it biological shit, is it a mental illness? Don't worry about any of that. People can make their own choices, and we can be sympathetic to those people, but we should also be sympathetic to their choices. And I guess this brings me back to the issue of trans race and this racial dolezal shit going on in the article that was written recently that caused a big shitstorm with everyone. And this is where things get really complicated, because this is the door I think we've opened, and this is a problem that I have to deal with myself because of my approach being more from the heart and not from the mind. So if we disconnect the heart from the mind, and I admit to you, and I readily admit to you, that the science is the basis in which we can all understand, while the feeling is something that we are going to look at more subjectively as opposed to objectively, then I look at something as trans race, and I have a problem with that. And I have to kind of figure this out and tackle this myself. And this is why I love doing this video series, because I'm able to sit down with you guys and be like, I don't really know the answer. I don't know how to rectify the fact that to identify as a different gender, just as to identify as a different sexuality, for me, is a heart-driven issue and not a mind-driven issue. In other words, it's a question of personal liberty that doesn't affect anyone else. Then why do I have a problem with trans race? And I guess the issue for me is that there could be no scientific basis for it, at least as far as I could tell. What I mean by that is, if I went to Mongolia and I adopted a Mongolian infant, and I brought him back or her back to the United States, and I raised him or her here in California with Erin, and we raised that child as an American, there's nothing about that person's experience genetically that's going to make them feel like, oh, I have a longing for this place in Central, Asia, and it's not going to happen. They're going to be American. They're going to be as American as I am. American, as many of you, as American as my girlfriend. And so I look at that and I'm like, that's a very different situation in many ways from being transgender, from gender dysphoria, or from being homosexual or bisexual. And again, I understand that this all conflicts, which is why I wanted to do this video, which is why I announced and proclaimed on Twitter that I wanted to tackle this, because I haven't really been able to talk it out with you guys and gals out there. I haven't really been able to tell you guys how I feel in a manner that lets us have a conversation and maybe even do a follow-up video on this, because I look at trans race and I'm like, well, as a male, I don't look at someone identifying as a male and being like, well, you're stealing my sexuality, you're stealing my gender, you're appropriating these things. And yes, again, there are many problems that have to do with that from a societal and governmental stance, and we talked about some of those earlier. But again, it really doesn't affect my life. But with Rachel Dolezal, for instance, if she identifies as a black woman, even though she's clearly not, apparently she's like Central European or Eastern European, Czech and stuff like that, she's white. She's a white woman. And then if I were black, then I would look at that and be like, well, you're kind of appropriating our race in a way. You're appropriating our experience, which you didn't experience. You have the ability to turn that off. If Rachel Dolezal suddenly didn't want to be black anymore and didn't want to identify as black, well, she has the opportunity to do that. But a black person, a dark-skinned black person that wanted to somehow identify as white, will never be able to do that. And so I understand that argument, and where that's kind of where the ball is starting to roll down the hill and we're starting to lose control of it. And I think that, again, is it a question of personal liberty? Yeah. Is Rachel Dolezal, for instance, is her decision affecting my life in any material way? Not at all. But I am a white man. And you know damn well that I'm not one of those people that talks about my privilege and all that stuff. I fucking hate that shit, and you know that I do, and I don't care about any of that stuff from a gender basis, from a race basis. I am a proud, straight, white man. I didn't do anything to anyone else. I didn't hold anyone else down. I don't even have a ticket to my name. I live my life in a good way. I think I'm a good, decent person, a kind person, a giving person. So I don't try to judge anyone else based on those, and I don't expect to be judged based on that either. And I think a lot of you know that. So I'm not one of these guys sitting here and talking about experience and all that kind of stuff. But again, you have to look at it objectively. And the objective reality is that while a man identifying as a woman doesn't really affect anything for anyone, except for maybe the person's friends, family, and colleagues and peers, and they have to deal with that in their own way, well, yeah, Rachel Dolezal's kind of loaded situation is way different, and we have to identify that. And that's where maybe we draw the line, but I don't know the answer to that. I wanted to really start a conversation with you guys about it, because it is so very confusing, and it is so wrought with precariousness, in the sense that, where do we draw the line? Where do we draw the line in terms of happiness? I often cite the Declaration of Independence and such amazing writing there with Thomas Jefferson, where he talks about the pursuit of happiness. Now, the Declaration of Independence isn't a legal document by any standard, and it's certainly not really important to anyone outside of the United States, but it sets a nice tenor to say, do you have the right to pursue happiness? And yes, you have the natural right to pursue what makes you happy, as long as you respect the ability of everyone else around you to openly pursue their own happiness. So I want you guys to just think about this in a little bit of a different way, to not get caught in the weeds, to not get lost in the weeds and think that you have to judge those around you in such negative ways. I see a lot of people out there, especially on social media, talking really disparagingly about transgender people, and I just don't understand why. How is it affecting you? How is it affecting your life? The transgender community is a community under siege. And I think that they're a community that deserves to be heard, that they deserve to be loved and respected as they are, who they are. And we shouldn't worry about the atomic nature of it. We shouldn't worry about the X's and Y's, as it were, as opposed to the X's and O's in football. We shouldn't worry about the X's and Y's. We should worry about what makes a person happy. Because a happy person is a productive person. A productive person is an economically beneficial person, a person that adds to society, they don't take from society. If we can get transgender people to a place where they feel respected, where they feel loved, where they feel safe, then I think we're all going to be better off. But if we keep othering them and kind of moving the goalposts and changing the situation around, then I think we're going to find ourselves in a situation a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And I do say that this is the civil rights movement of our day and our time. Gay people have pretty much won their fight, although the fight persists in many ways. Racial minorities in many places in the world have won their equality. Whether or not they're dealing with it in real ways still, and they certainly are, the fight, at least at the governmental, legislative level, at the societal level, at the level of mind and heart, has largely been won. But remember that there's a really small minority of people out there that aren't really asking for much, at least not from my perspective, and they're not going to get the world from me. They're not going to get support for federal funding from me. They're not going to get support for checking the box when they apply to college, identifying as a gender that they weren't necessarily born into, if that causes a problem for other people of that gender and kind of snuffs them out. They're not going to get support from me, of course, in athletics where a biological man is destroying women in volleyball or destroying women in weightlifting or whatever it might be. I think that you do have to draw the line there as well. But if all they're asking from you and all they're asking from me is a little bit of respect, a little bit of understanding, to see a man who identifies as a woman, and yeah, maybe it's clearly a biological man, but all they want to be referred to as she or her, is it really that big of a deal? Is it really going to end your life? Is it really going to make you die? Is that really the hill you want to die on? There are more. Look what's going on in the White House right now. Look what's going on in the world. Look at North Korea and Eastern Europe and Russia and all these kinds of things. We have bigger fish to fry, and I do feel like a unified society is much more powerful frying those fish than us fighting these civil wars amongst us when we should be more united. So I think I've said my piece. I'm curious what you guys think of all this. So let me know in the comments below. Be respectful to each other, please. Thumb up the video if you like, thumb it down if you didn't like it. Please share it with your friends and family and your colleagues and your Facebook friends and all those kinds of things. Remember also that I'm not running ads here presently on Facebook at all. The only source of revenue for this show is over at patreon.com/ColinsLastStand, where you can join me for a monthly donation of $1 or $5 or $10 or up, and you get all sorts of different benefits. For instance, if you support us at the $10 or up level, I just put up an exclusive Q&A video that's about 70 minutes where we talk and I answer your questions. 3 times a week at the $5 and up level, I put up what's called a news burst, where I kind of distill the news of the day, link you to all sorts of interesting stories, etc. and so on, so you guys can go check that out. And if you just want to support silently at $1, you can do that too. Thank you so much for your kindness. Thank you so much for your support and your love. But all right, I've said everything I need to say. I leave it to you. Let's chat. I'll see you next time. Keep on learning.